Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Youth Endowment Fund. And it's wonderful to see so many faces. Many I recognise, many I've come across along the way. I'm Caleb Jackson, Head of Change for Youth and Community Sector. Today's virtual learning cafe is entitled Detached Youth Work, a popular approach nationwide, but can it reduce violence? It's part of our Evidence in Practice series. And there's a small caveat there that we'll learn about what Detached is doing at the moment and hear from colleagues about some of the practice and where we're at as an organization and what might the future hold. During this session, we'll delve into what the evidence says about popular approaches. We'll explore some of the principles shared by leading practitioners, which has helped us formulate what the next step might be here, and give us a greater understanding as to the impact that detached youth work can have at a neighborhood level. So thanks for joining us. We'll get started. There's no time to waste. We're on a strict 1 hour, and we want to get to you all the information that you need, and we've got to share with you in this session. So thanks so much for signing up. I'll share my slides just to kick us off, and then in a few minutes I'll hand over to our presenters who will talk to you more about the different aspects that I just spoke about in terms of objectives. So once again, welcome, and we're glad to have you in that regard. So in terms of who we are, if this is your first time coming across our work, just really at overhead, which just really nicely plays into kind of a clearer understanding as to why we have an interest in detached youth work. And so let's do that. Let's give you an overview and then go from there. To kick off, we want to change this. We want to ensure that the world is a place where no child becomes involved in violence. That's our vision. That's why we're here. And in order to do that, we rely on 7 essential sectors. So our work is predominantly based on focusing on sectors, and you are the youth sector, invariably acting and behaving in different ways to try to reduce violence where you are. And you'll see here youth sector here, but there are 6 others: children's services, neighborhoods, health, education, police, and youth justice. To be able to live out our vision, we need a mission. And the mission is that we're going to find out what works and build a movement to put this knowledge into practice. So finding out what works is the testing the impact of what we do, and building the movement is, here's a conversation with you. We want to work with so many colleagues in this room and attending this VLC, that the purpose is that we hope that whatever we find to work, you'll have the knowledge alongside your skills to put that into practice. That's fundamentally what we do. And if you've not seen this before, we have our strategy on a slide. Basically, we need to be our utmost best to understand the situation that young people are living in, where violence occurs, happens, and what the trends, and what the system and the practices are at the moment, and how we might play a role to enabling colleagues who are responsible for dealing with this. You might be a funder that's listening in today. You might be a practitioner. You might be a delivery organization. You might be an umbrella organization. You might be a researcher. You're all welcome and glad to have you. So fundamentally, we fund good work that's working out the world and the current place that it's in, and using all available accessibility around data and research and evaluation and programs to understand what we must fund and what we should fund, and getting the kind of best programs to do that on an interventional basis. Then we find what works, which a lot of it is on the toolkit. If you haven't been to the toolkit, you'll get the chance to. The toolkit is the Which Guide to Youth to Reducing Youth Violence, and there's a 2,000 strong repository of studies, and it's accessible, user-friendly, and available for free to everybody that so wish to look at it and use it. And then the practice guide and system guide comes up from the finding what works based on the sector. So how might we do that based on the evidence of what we know? And then finally, we work for change. So today is about growing demand. We want appetite in the youth sector for evidence and how that might shift the ever-changing sand for how youth work approaches this, and the value to youth work that it can provide for reducing youth violence. So this is part of that understanding. But there are gaps in the evidence. And so looking at detached youth work is a gap in the evidence, and you'll hear more from colleagues who will speak about that. And so you can get an understanding of where we're at currently. But whilst I'm here, it would be remiss of me to not introduce you to the next virtual learning cafe, which is the role of youth work in social skills training to reduce violence. That's youth workers working in schools with young people. And so I'm sure there are many youth work organizations here. We will send out the link later. I'll put them in the chat whilst I'm not talking. Do sign up to that. Get in early. This one sold out, so that's fantastic. That's great news for us, but equally great news for the sector in terms of us adding some benefit to the work that you do. And then also, register now. And we've got the just hot the press. We pressed the button this morning, and what youth work should look like in 2029 for vulnerable children. And we have UK Youth and NYA who will be holding that space, and that is in conversation with to hear about what should 2029 look like, and certainly look out for a video that I'll be doing about what my views are on that. Well, I'll stop sharing there, and I want to introduce our first speakers. And we're at 160, which is great. So I think everyone's popped over from where they were. So the team who've carried out the recent feasibility study on detached youth work are going to speak. So we've got Bethia, who is the director for the Centre for Youth Impact, has held roles at Dartington Social Research Unit and National Youth Agency. If you know anything about impact, evidence, and youth work, Bethia is pretty much in the mix of all of that, looking at interest in quality and measurement of youth work and collaborative practices. So it's great to have Betty here, and it's currently seconded, which maybe Betty might talk more about. And also we're joined by Jane Lewis, who's the Managing Director at the Centre for Evidence Implementation, which is a global evidence intermediary carrying out evaluation, evidence synthesis, and support for implementation and scaling. So Jane is a long-standing advocate for evidence and effective implementation to enhance services for children and families, and leads evaluation and other studies in the UK more widely. So welcome, team. The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I think we're going first, and Bethia is going to kick off the presentation on the feasibility study that we did with our colleagues Caroline Bryson and Susan Purden at Bryson Purden Social Research, looking at, is there a way in which detached youth work could be evaluated to see if it's possible to measure the impact of it. So Bethia, I think you are uploading the presentation and kicking us.
Okay, sorry.
All right, well, I can do that if...
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Jane. Sorry. Sorry, colleagues. Clearly, Jane and our telepathy wasn't working efficiently in the run-up to this. Okay, it's a real delight to be here with you. Thank you very much to everyone. It's amazing, 161 of you, or of us all together. And it's been, I can't tell you, such a privilege to be involved in this work. And I just want for a moment to commend Caleb and colleagues at YEF to committing to this exploration. I think there are many funders that would have concluded that this is too complicated, too complex a question or a Pandora's box to open. But actually, YEF have committed to and have worked alongside us and supported us to step into this space of talking about what sits at the intersection of the nature of detached youth work and the drivers and demands of a What Works Centre, because that's the context, that's the background to this, and critically importantly, YEF's role. And that's the space that I just want to say a few words from at the beginning. So Caleb talked about the background to this work being evidence gaps, and that's very true, but it's really important to recognise, and everyone involved in the broader youth sector will recognise that the notion of evidence gaps is quite contentious. It often, how big the gap is and whether the gap even exists often depends on where you're standing or what you're looking at. And it's the gaps that we're talking about here relates to both the type of evidence, but also evidence of what. So what are we looking for? Evidence about what and why. So the work that we did was primarily about exploring the feasibility of impact evaluation very specifically. So a particular type of evaluation looking for a particular type of focus in detached youth work. We wanted to start by looking at what had been done before and what is known in inverted commas about detached youth work. Jane, would you just be able to move on to just the next slide, if that's all right? Because this is what we're going to cover today. Sorry. Oh, my slide's not there. Okay,
Sorry, Bethia.
It's all right. That's okay. I am absolutely certain that I can freestyle, and I'll tell you what to imagine in your heads. Because basically what I was mainly going to show you was a picture of an iceberg, but I'll come on to that in a moment. So, okie dokie. So, much of what we saw and read and heard as we spoke to many of you and some of your colleagues during the feasibility study reflected the picture that relates to the broader youth work practice, or youth work practice more generally, in terms of what's known in terms of data and evidence. So many of you will know that there isn't really a national picture of youth work provision anymore, and that includes detached youth work provision. The old insights that we used to have had have fallen away as the infrastructure for the youth sector has been depleted. Some of it is coming, has been built back, but it's nothing like it was pre-2010. We've got really disparate delivery structures and models now at a local level. Many of the university courses for youth work no longer exist, and they were also critical drivers of our knowledge and our reflective practice as well, and many of them don't exist anymore. So what we think we know about impact is also critically dependent on how evidence is defined and why it's defined in that way. And we must recognise some particular challenges for detached youth work in this space as well. We know, well, I say we know, I'd be cautious about this. I think there's sufficient data to suggest that detached youth work has been hit especially hard by cuts to youth sector provision. That was borne out, I think, in the work that we did in the study and by others as well. I think we know as well, I think we can be relatively confident that local authority youth services were some of the primary providers of detached youth work, and we know that they have been decimated. That the idea of a local authority youth services is nothing in terms of compared to how it used to look and how widespread it was, again, pre-2010. And we also know that there are some significant challenges relating to evaluation that are connected to the model, the practice of detached youth work. So it's the very nature of detached youth work that we want to understand in terms of quality relationships, in terms of the use of space. But at the same time, it's those things that make it challenging to evaluate. So there's a particularly unique and interesting challenge here. There's also a tension over the agenda of detached youth work, I think, because detached youth work is largely, and we talked in the language of our work about being both led by young people and centred on young people's experience. And evaluation often involves applying an agenda or a set of interests that won't necessarily be driven by or centred on the young people, because we're exploring public policy questions. So there doesn't have to involve conflict, but there's a tension there that we need to recognise. So when you look at the evidence base of the impact of detached youth work, what you see in common with broader youth work is there is more qualitative than quantitative evidence. So we see more stories, we see more narrative, we see more oral histories, we see more personal reflections and testimony than we do see numbers, quantifiable data. We see small samples, or small scale research, so smaller groups of young people and of practitioners. We see very limited ability to compare across different studies or across different evaluations. We also see no control groups, which is the act of looking at what would have happened or what happens for young people who don't participate in something. That's a challenge, a particular challenge in universal and open access youth work to define, and there are ethical issues with defining a group of young people who don't get a thing. And often the research is actually focused on the voices of the detached youth workers rather than the young people. That's often because of the ethical issues of talking to young people or disrupting that relationship. That's quite common to broader youth work, but I think it's very specific to detached youth work. If you imagine in your head an iceberg, the picture that I was going to show you is if the iceberg represents all the evidence that we have about detached youth work, where you imagine the sea level to be entirely depends on the kind of evidential standards that you apply. So if you apply very high standards of evidence, so you're looking for control group studies, you're looking for randomized control group type approaches or methodologies, you will see that there's not very much that sits above the waterline. And that's the kind of some of the evidence gaps that Caleb and colleagues are talking about. It doesn't mean that the things under the waterline are not there. There is a rich history and narrative around detached youth work that we must and did, I hope, bring in and will continue to bring in. But it simultaneously doesn't mean that when you apply, particularly within a what works framing, that the bit of the iceberg that pokes above the water is quite small. And there is a significant potential, as I say, I commend YEF, and it's been a privilege to be part of an exploration of how we can understand the whole of the iceberg and bring more of it above the waterline. So I'm going to pass on now to Jane, I think.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Bethia. Huge apologies for not including your iceberg slide, which you sent me, but you've done a brilliant job there of bringing it to life. So, on the basis of absolutely everything that Bethia has just said, the Youth Endowment Fund asked us to carry out a project looking at what an impact evaluation of detached youth work might actually look like. So we want to first of all explain what it was that we did, and then talk about the proposed design that we came up with. What we did was talk to as many people as we possibly could. We did 21 interviews with organisations involved in providing detached youth work and with some organisations that commission it. And we put out a survey through our networks and asking people to distribute it more widely of providers and commissioners. And we got 93 responses, 93 different people or organisations involved in delivering youth work, detached youth work, telling us about what they did. After we'd analysed the interviews and looked at the survey, we got together 4 workshops with detached youth work providers to drill down into the issues more in detail with them. Adam was a very active participant in all of the workshops. We're hugely grateful to everybody that took part. And we also did a rapid review of literature on how you might go about doing surveys with young people that evaluators typically find it very hard to reach and who very often get missed out from evaluations, but who are the absolute core of detached youth work. Based on all of that, we developed a theory of change, we developed a shared practice model, and we developed an evaluation design, which is what we'll talk through. I want to start by just putting on the map the key principles of detached youth work. And I'm not going to say very much about this because Adam will speak about it much more articulately and in a much more nuanced way than us, but it is the absolute core of the work that we did. And so we want to kind of share with you what we saw as the key principles, which is what our design is really kind of based on and trying to honour. You can talk about the key principles in different sorts of ways, but for us, there were 4 really key things that came out of the interviews and the workshops and the survey. First of all, no big surprises that detached youth work happens in public spaces, usually hyperlocal areas. And that means that detached youth work bring into it a real understanding of local knowledge and local context and local histories. Something else that was said to us very clearly is that those groups might be quite mobile. So they might start off maybe around a playing field in the summer and then move into somewhere that has a bit more cover or a bit more lighting in the winter, or what starts off on one street corner might actually end up moving to another street corner. The second key principle that we heard really loudly is that because it happens in public spaces, the relationships are quite exceptionally voluntary and negotiated. I mean, I think you'd say that about all youth work, but it is particularly so in relation to detached youth work. It is young people's space, it's their world, and you're there on their terms. And that creates a very different power dynamic. And it means that trustful and respectful relationships, which are utterly the heart of all youth work, are totally at the heart of detached youth work, even more so, and that authenticity and integrity are very, very central. It's also particularly centred on youth needs, youth experiences, youth interests. It is a much more flexible way of working than other forms of youth work. And there really is absolutely no predefined mix or agreed set of activities that will be that will be delivered. All of that is worked out with young people there and then. But it's all about supporting their agency, and it's about supporting their right to be there. So it's rights-based work, and it's also strengths-based work, recognizing that young people have every right to be where they are in public spaces. It's work that needs to be very, very culturally considerate and very microculture considerate, and it needs to be long-term, longer term than often the funding is available for. So I hope we've perhaps started to do justice to the principles that that sit at the heart of detached youth work. As I say, Adam will, I think, talk more about that. One of the things that we heard very clearly is that detached youth work doesn't work to specific preordained, defined aims or outcomes. It's much more about working to find out where young people are at and what it is that they want and what it is that they need. And it's also clear that the work encompasses a very wide range of areas. But in the survey, we asked participants what parts of young people's lives they aim to support through detached youth work. And we found very high levels of people telling us that it's about aiming to support well-being, confidence and mental health, reducing antisocial behaviour, helping people to stay safe, reducing gang exploitation, protecting people from involvement in youth violence, also about reducing substance misuse, addressing social and emotional learning skills, helping people sometimes to engage with other support services, supporting their relationships with peers and family, might be about sexual health, might also be about helping people to engage in education, employment, or training, or might be about other things. But what was actually really striking was that around half of the people that took part in the survey identified all 9 as being areas of their work. So it's exceptionally widely based in its work, and has a very wide set of aims, which flex depending on the group of young people you're working with. Similarly, we asked people about what are the actual activities involved in detached youth work, again recognising that they're very flexible and very varied. And again, what we found was that over 80% of people who participated selected 6 or more activities, and you can see how many of them are delivered by large proportions of people. So absolutely everybody saying that detached youth work involves getting to know young people, befriending them in relationship building. Almost everybody talking about providing information, advice or guidance, simply being a presence on the street, signposting to services that other organisations provide or engaging them with your own services. Might also very often be about doing sport or cultural or other street-based activities, and then also might be about intervening to diffuse conflict or respond to potential or actual conflict or violence, helping people to engage with their peers, and then still the majority of participants saying providing mentoring or being a role model, facilitating youth-led projects, and around half saying it's also about engaging with families. So very wide-ranging in the work that's involved. So it's very clear that it takes different forms, and that it's highly flexible and highly adaptable work. To be able to evaluate the impact of it, there needs to be a degree of commonality in what is actually being delivered, so that we know that when we're saying that detached youth work achieved the following aims, we know that we're talking about broadly the same thing when we talk about detached youth work. And to assist with that, we developed what we've called a shared practice model. And to do that, we got together people like Adam and asked them to tell us about what their detached youth work looks like. And then we came back with a kind of consolidated version of it that we aimed to be specific enough so that people could say yes, no, but not so specific that it was missing any of the kind of main models of detached youth work, and also flexible enough so that if it was delivered in an evaluation, it wouldn't be kind of jamming a particular model onto detached youth work. It wouldn't be excluding forms of detached youth work or making people do it in odd kinds of ways, which would also simply not be a good test of detached youth work. So we designed with folks like Adam a shared practice model, and we called out particularly 4 sets of things. The first is that there needs to be some process to set up detached youth work. There needs to be a specific decision to work in a particular area. So the area needs to be selected on the basis of some particular considerations. And there needs to be some reconnaissance to engage with local people, engage with local stakeholders, get a sense of what's going on there, the history of it, the culture of it, before the detached youth work actively begins. We didn't prescribe how that work is done, or for how long, or by how many people, or involving how many contacts, but we said something around that needs to happen. We also, because we would want the evaluation to really focus on the best model of detached youth work, we also talked with folks about who should be on the team. And what we ended up saying was, proposing for the shared practice model, is that the team should involve at least 2 experienced detached youth workers, so folks with experience of detached youth work, that they should be working towards or have already undertaken level 2 certificate. And there should be some form of supervision and peer learning with session briefs or debriefs or both, and then coming together regularly to support practice. Again, we didn't prescribe how that was done, but we said that something needed to be done. Then in terms of the ongoing delivery, we called out particularly the idea of the detached youth workers being present in the area for at least 4 hours a week. They can organise that in whatever way they want, that the focus is on relationship building and what we loosely called informal education, by which we meant things like befriending, mentoring, role modelling, talking, discussing, providing guidance in relationship-based kinds of ways, and that it might also involve advocating on behalf of young people individually or collectively to other members of the community. It might involve outreach work, signposting your own or other people's services. It might involve other activities, but that those would be flexible. And then finally, in terms of the duration, we said that the detached youth work ought to aim to be working up and running in a particular area for at least 2 years, including the reconnaissance period, recognising that that's really at the top end, or at least that's longer than much detached youth work is actually funded for. But again, we want this to be a fair test of detached youth work, so we want it to be a really strong model. And then finally, we said that there needed to be a plan for ending the presence in the locality. We didn't say what that should be or how it should be come up with, but that there should be a plan rather than simply abrupt termination. So that's the shared practice model. And we also drew up a theory of change. Now, there are lots of existing theories of change for detached youth work out there. And we're not saying that this is the best one or the only one or the right one or the rightest one, but we need to have a theory of change for the evaluation that would explain how we think detached youth work makes a difference, because that would then be what we would be testing. And so we're just showing a simplified version here, but based on what we heard from everybody, it seemed to us that there were really 2 sets of activities and 2 sets of outcomes and impacts that are being worked to. One is for the specific young people that you're working with directly in detached youth work. And then the other set is for the wider community. And of course, that wider community includes those very young people that you're working with, but it also speaks more widely than them. So in terms of the activities, at a very broad level, that detached youth work involves, with young people, it involves those one-to-one conversations that can take many different forms with many different content, and that it also involves group activities, again, of different forms. And in terms of the key activity for the community level outcomes, that's about advocacy on behalf of young people, advocating for their right to be there, advocating in ways that would help to build stronger relationships. Then in terms of the shorter term outcomes, for young people, what we heard about is having positive relationships with the detached youth workers and with their peers and family and so on, having increased resilience and increased emotional regulation, more sense of self-efficacy and agency, more of a sense of being able to kind of drive their own destinies, having and making more positive choices, and having access to better local provision. And what we described the shorter term outcomes at a community level as being were, first of all, positive relationships between the young people directly involved in detached youth work and the wider community. Younger people and the community feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling like they belong. Community members having a really good understanding of young people's needs, or a better understanding of young people's needs, and everybody having a sense of safety in the local area. And then in terms of the overall impacts for young people, we saw that as being having better life chances, better opportunities, being able to take better directions in their lives, having more social capital, so more and stronger relationships with the people around them, feeling and being safe, and having opportunities for education, employment, and training. And then at a community level, we've described the impacts as being a sense of safety for everybody, stronger community cohesion, less crime, less exploitation, an improved physical environment, and better services for young people. So as we say, that's not the only theory of change that you could draw up, but at a high level, that's the theory of change that we've developed and proposed that the evaluation should be based on. So then moving on to what we actually proposed in terms of the evaluation, what we have recommended is that the evaluation should go forward with around 15 or 20 different local partnerships, each delivering detached youth work in a number of selected patches. And by patches, we mean a specific locality. It might be a street corner, it might be inside and outside a McDonald's, it might be by a bus station, it might be in a park, it might be in a skate park or whatever. And what we've said is that it should have two elements. The first is an implementation and process evaluation, where the real focus will be on what is it that young people experience. What do they hear? What do they feel? How do they take part in detached youth work? What difference do they say it makes? And then there should be an impact evaluation alongside that, which is looking at whether there are measurable changes over time for the whole community. And what we've also said is that there needs to be a really substantial co-design phase. You know, we feel like we've done a lot of the groundwork in developing the evaluation, but taking it forward involves a lot of close work between the evaluation team and these local partnerships. I'll talk first of all about the implementation and process evaluation, and then come back to the impact evaluation. So the implementation and process evaluation, this is really involves very, very close working with the partnerships and agencies involved in delivering detached youth work. And it's really about finding out what is it that's happening, what do young people experience, and what difference do they think it makes. So this is where hearing young people's voices naturally and in their own authentic expression is absolutely crucial. And we've recommended approaches like peer researchers, so having young people interview each other, having youth workers act as researchers and interview young people, and also creative expression opportunities, which might involve vlogs or creating videos or other ways in which young people might choose to express themselves. What we've recommended is that there is a sort of menu of options, but that each partnership works with the evaluation team to work out which of these options would work best for them. So one partnership in one locality might feel that their ideal approach would be for young people to interview each other. Another might already be running an arts-based project and feel that that would be a terrific vehicle for hearing young people's voices about detached youth work there. We'd also really suggest that the evaluation team explore whether it's possible to do surveys of young people. It might be a snapshot in time. There might be opportunities to repeat the survey to look at change over time for individual young people. Might involve paper-based or an app, or youth workers administering the survey, or young people completing it online. Lots of issues to be decided there. And then it would need to involve a lot of regular liaison with the delivery teams, with those partnerships, and collecting a lot of monitoring data to build up a really detailed picture of what it was that was happening, why each partnership was doing that, what were they responding to, what were they adapting and flexing to, and what do they feel was working well. So that's the implementation and process evaluation, which would be a really important part of the evaluation overall. Then the impact evaluation. So what we are proposing is that each partnership, as I've said, would identify a number of localities where they think that detached youth work is needed and might rightly happen. And we would then, the challenge is that if detached youth work then goes ahead in all of those localities, we don't have anything to compare it to. And so whatever changes we monitor over time, we wouldn't know whether those are the result of detached youth work or the result of other things that are going on in that local area or in those young people's lives. And what we want to know is, does detached youth work add to other stuff that's going on in those young people's lives and in the local area? And the best way of ascertaining that is to take the set of patches where detached youth work could happen and have it happen in some of them, and then monitor to see whether there are changes over time in outcomes for those patches, and have some where detached youth work doesn't happen and where services as usual happen, and to monitor what changes happen over time in those areas, and then to compare those two to see whether there are more positive changes happening at a community level where detached youth work did happen. And if there are, then we can confidently say that those changes are because of detached youth work. So that's the model that the impact evaluation would apply. And so patches would be randomly allocated to either receive detached youth work or to continue with services as usual. So whatever activity is already going on or might be initiated by schools, by youth clubs, by police, and so on. We'd focus or recommend that the evaluation focuses the collection of outcomes at a community level, including young people as community members. And the reason for that is twofold. First of all, it's clear from the interviews that local level impacts are really important parts of detached youth work. It's about everybody feeling safe, better community cohesion, lower levels of antisocial behaviour and crime, less exploitation. The second reason is that we can't feasibly measure individual young people's outcomes at baseline and at a follow-up point, because that would mean administering surveys to them right at the very start of detached youth work, before those relationships have been formed. And the strong message we got was that that would really distort detached youth work if that's what we were asking detached youth workers to go in and do straight away. So that can't be done until after those relationships have been formed. And then secondly, we'd also have to be doing the baselining and the endpoint outcomes with young people in the comparison areas where detached youth work didn't happen. And it's just really impossible to think about, well, who are those young people and how would we get to them? We can't get to them through services, because the whole point is that they're not engaging with services. And so that would just be impossible to do. So that's the model that we've proposed. The impact evaluation data would involve community level surveys, including surveys of young people, that would get at whether there are changes in people's feelings of safety and their sense of local cohesion. We would do observational work in the patches, both those where detached youth work happens and where it doesn't happen, to look at, for example, is there more drug detritus or less drug detritus in the areas where there was detached youth work? Is there less graffiti? Is there less broken glass? Is there less evidence of antisocial behaviour? We'd also use hyperlocal police data, looking at recorded levels of antisocial behaviour and crime, recognising that that data doesn't speak on its own, but we would triangulate it with these other types of data. And then also mapping the other activity that happens in the patches alongside detached youth work and where detached youth work doesn't happen, so that we've got a full understanding of what's been going on.
And Jane, just a minute left, just so we
Okay,
need enough time for questions. But I think you're on your final comment slide anyway, so super.
For sure, I am.
Yeah,
so extensive qualitative research and mapping, identifying patches where detached youth work could happen. Co-design will be absolutely fundamental. This is a journey that evaluators and delivery partners would have to take together. It's going to need really careful design together, really careful piloting. The evaluation will need to be creative in the data methods used. This isn't conventional evaluation territory. And young people's perspectives are at the absolute core of it. The focus in the implementation and process evaluation, and measured ideally in surveys as part of that, and in community surveys. So I'll stop at that point. It'd be terrific to hear your thoughts and your questions on it, and contact details for our team are there. So I'll stop sharing at that point and hand back, Caleb, to you and to Adam.
Yeah, super. Thank you. And just to say, Amy Hall, who's also at CEI, isn't here, but has been a crucial part, and Caroline and Susan, who are from the Bryson and Purden social research, or have played into this, and Caroline's on the call, but it isn't presenting. So Adam, we've got 10 minutes for you now, but that's okay. I'm sure you'll be able to handle it, and have loads of things to say that would just iterate and corroborate with what's been said already from your view. Adam is the Director of Youth Work at Brighton and Hove based charity, the Trust for Developing Communities, TDC, and they exist to tackle inequality and create a city where people can be healthy and included, leveraging everyone's assets. Adam's established and oversees the multi-award-winning Brighton Streets Detached Youth Work Partnership, delivering 6 to 7 sessions per week across Brighton and Hove, is funded by Sussex Violence Reduction Partnership, which is the local VRU or VRP. And the project delivers both mobile and on foot, which links closely with other stakeholders, including policing, council, and business reduction partnership. So over to you, Adam. I won't take any more of your time.
Thank you. Just checking you can see my presentation now.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to speak double speed because I've been given 10 minutes for a 20-minute presentation. This is me. I do stuff, and I've been detached youth working for over 20 years. I look like I'm in my 20s, but I'm not. Caleb's done an introduction. I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. I was asked to come and speak about what good detached youth work looks and feels like, some of the main challenges, best practice stuff, and successes and challenges for measuring. But I was just going to start by telling you about how our project came about, because I think it frames some of that. Quick overview. Back in the day, as was already flagged, actually, local authority was operating a detached youth service in the city, and in that it was coordinated and citywide. It was cut in 2017 with lots of the other council youth service offer. What was left was a collection of voluntary sector organisation doing ad hoc detached youth work across the city. It was dependent on bits of funding being available. It might be seasonal, and it was kind of in the wilderness. So we were brought together June 2019 for a contextual safeguarding conference, and that was cool in so many ways. I think credit to the people like Professor Carleen Furman and Jenny Lamb, who've been doing amazing work in contextual safeguarding and influencing social work. But they did come and present contextual safeguarding to a room full of detached youth workers who were like, well, yeah. That's kind of what we've been doing for years and years. But one of the things that was really powerful about that was we did gain some new language around what we were doing, which is contextual safeguarding, that's helpful and applicable in lots of settings now. And we had these conversations, and it was that detached team over there who were seeing that particular drug that week. We were seeing it the next week, and we were going, oh, that's really useful. oh, we were working with this group in the middle of town and we lost them, we didn't know where they went. Oh, well, they popped up in Hove, for instance. And it just became super, super clear that we needed a coordinated citywide detached youth work offer to kind of shrink the holes in the safeguarding and join up the intelligence and just be more effective in supporting young people. We actually went to the Youth Endowment Fund for funding when they started their kind of opening round in March 2019. And they got back to us. What was it? We couldn't demonstrate how the theory of change was informed by evidence available. And I don't know if that was about the evidence available or yeah, or just it being robust enough, if you know what I mean. So so that kind of started a bit of a preoccupation with telling the YEF that we need to do detached. And there's like over 170 people on this call. The study that was just proposed that you've just heard about, we would love for YEF to push go on it. And if everyone on this call emailed Caleb directly and said, we're really interested, there's loads of us and we all really want to do this, then we'll try and make it happen. Ha! So we didn't get funded by YEF, but we did get funded by the VRU. So Brighton Streets was the name of the project. It was born in October 19 and we got given £75,000 at the time. The partners, 3 local partners, that was important because we didn't have one team. We leveraged the people who already had relationships in different areas of the city and we pulled them together. We also joined forces with the Brighton's business crime reduction partnership, the council's community safety partnership, Are You OK as our adolescent specialist youth service in the city, Sussex Police in the mix. And then we've delivered stuff like Pride Youth Welfare Service, which has been amazing. Speeding forwards. Since then, will the slides catch up? One of the first things we did, we wanted to feel like a coordinated citywide offer. We trained everyone together. So we brought in Federation for Detached Youth Work, some contemporary thinking from the likes of Craig Pinkney on road youth work, substance use stuff, and made sure that we brought everyone together. 75 grand wasn't just to deliver youth work. We also had some other things that we were asked to do. So we pulled together a conference on reduction of violence. COVID-19 came along beginning of 2020. I'm assuming people remember that. All of our building-based youth work stopped, but interestingly, we worked really quickly, and I basically wrote up a degree of youth worker designation as essential key workers. I gave it to the Director of Children's Services and the Chief Superintendent in Sussex Police. And by May, we were designated as key workers. So April, first lockdown, May, we were already able to go out and crack on doing our detached youth work, which is amazing because I don't think that nationally youth work was given its designation key worker status till January 2021. So we were really, really happy to do that. We made a film. Some of you may have seen it. We were building it to show at conference, and we were building it in the context of reducing violence for young people. Not all detached youth work is about reducing violence that affects young people. Young people should just have detached youth work. But this was our the context for that film. We had evaluation done. You can go on our website and find this. We did a most significant change thing where young people gave us just one answer for what they thought they got out of our detached youth work. We then themed that, and then we asked young people in walking interviews, some of our beneficiaries, about it. So we thought we had done quite well in terms of building a sympathetic evaluation model. We've won we won a partnership award from Children Young People Now and a Howard League award. We won't dwell on that. Sussex Police, I convinced them to buy us a £50,000 bus last year. So we've been cruising around in our new mobile unit since then as well. Sorry, trying to skip forwards. Last year, 334 sessions, so nearly one a day for the year. 4,940 interventions, because we can't track and monitor unique individuals through that journey, but that gives you a sense of the scale. I catch my breath. Good Detached, we were really pleased to be part of the like the research proposal being built by the team that you just heard from. This is a kind of expanded version of the theory of change that was being discussed, and I've picked out some of these core principles to talk about, which we've already discussed actually, so I won't dwell. But led by young people's needs is important because if it's led by service needs, or the police say this is what we need to do, it's not youth work and it's not detached youth work. We work in the interests of young people in their primacy. We are in the service of young people as youth services. Good youth work is strengths based. So it's culturally considerate, it's long term. I'm not going to dwell because we're short on time. Advocacy, brokerage, translation is functions that happen for youth workers. We do translate between community and young people, and we kind of try and protect and make things better for all. And it's joined up, like there's detached youth work, which is the delivery. And I've seen work that's been quite siloed, and I talked about some of that siloed work done in one location without talking to others very much. And I think there are more sophisticated models where partnership with other agencies, other detached youth work is happening, and it's powerful. I've seen the effects. Challenges: we are overwhelmed by need. We have this, we're trying to keep to our kind of what we call the neighbourhood youth, detached youth work, which is consistency, long term in areas that deserve youth work, etc. We also have a more responsive kind of targeted youth provision where we get told about hotspots, and then we will say, yes, okay, we're going to work in this hotspot for 6 months, and we're going to build relationships, and we're going to do this and we'll do that. But we've got, like, I don't know, there are, for every hotspot that we can work, there are 2 that we can't. Sensitivity over intelligence sharing. We've had to build quite robust frameworks for like when we will and won't share intelligence about young people and their names. When people are going, oh, I've got the CCTV image, could you tell us who they are? Maybe. We've got information sharing agreements that maybe can share, but should we share is the question we ask ourselves. We do have some skeptics asking us if we attract young people to hotspots. Part of me kind of hopes we do, because actually the work that we are doing with them is incredible. The safeguarding work, the complex needs that we're supporting, the referrals and the relationship building. Sometimes we're the only people who are able to engage with some of those young people. So the idea that we're attracting them to a hotspot, I don't know, it doesn't faze me so much. Disproportionality is something that's interesting for us. We struggle to monitor diversity. It's harder than it is in our youth clubs where we have registration forms, etc. So we can't tell you what proportion of our beneficiaries are from young people of colour, for instance, or LGBTQ, etc. But we do try to build in additional engagement activities. Lovely example just recently, last couple of weeks. We brought a barber from an Afro Hair Academy out to our sessions, free haircuts, and they love it. And the young men who benefited, they were like, we want more. They came back and we helped them write a funding bid. Like, they wrote the bid, we submitted it for them, and they got £1,000 to bring the barber back and do more sessions this summer. So we're delighted, and we just kind of need to be conscious that we're offering more in terms of engagement to make sure we're meeting diverse groups. Walking and Talking was a piece of work that Kelly Bradshaw Walsh pulled together. It's brilliant in terms of a narrative understanding of the impact and process of youth work. Have a look for it. This is a link. It'll come out with the slides. We have issues proving we don't have randomized control trials, etc., for detached youth work. There are challenges with how to make those happen, and we're really hopeful that YEF will support the proposal that's come together through the partnership. There's a concern that I have about measuring the wrong thing, because I think that we build protective factors rather than reduce antisocial behaviour, reduce crime and violence and things. I think all of that stuff is beyond the kind of line of accountability. So I'd really like for us to measure the asset-based stuff that we know that we do. And I think the young people could articulate more easily than, you know, did we convince you to put your knife down? And yeah, what was I going to say on the composite understanding? Can't remember. It was probably really interesting, but I'm doing the quick version and I'm struggling to find it on my notes. Yeah, so this is about like research for detached not being so sophisticated, but actually if you look at things like hotspot policing or trusted adult research or contextual safeguarding, why not put those together to gain like an understanding of how this works? even if we're not measuring impact, and that process evaluation is really powerful. So I think if we talked about that, we might be in a place to understand it better. I'm going to stop sharing because that was me, and I know I didn't quite do that in 10 minutes, but I'm hoping that's a useful.
Absolutely, Adam, that was top class, and so much richness in that, and provocative thought too about firstly the diligence and where it came from, and how you're answering a local issue and have grown it, but equally some of the challenges within this area. So and it really points to the fact that we're in a really strong position to look at testing this. So look, we've got a couple of minutes for a couple of questions. Who wants to shoot? Probably a minute for a question, probably to be more. But yeah, huge thank you, Adam. Thank you for condensing that and making that. Yeah, Jonathan, you get the spotlight.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, Jonathan Shepherd, I chair the YEF's evaluation committee.
Welcome,
Yeah,
Jonathan.
thank you. Great. It's great to see everyone. Now, just a couple of points on the process evaluation. Presumably, how often and for how long detached youth workers need to be at the street corner or a park could be included. It's about how does this work and how might it work better. So there's that, and then the other, I guess, a question really on this again on evaluation. I mean, presumably, an evaluation would include identifying who the young people were and how to contact them. And if that's the case, then one measure could be adverse childhood experiences within the 6 months following the first contact. And then that data could be compared with a survey of a random sample of youth in those in similar settings, so other street corners or parks. So either recording adverse childhood experiences experienced by in the control group and in the intervention group, or just asking them about changes. What changes have there been in your life over the last, whatever period, about finding a job or going to education or, experiencing crime. So those will be, thank you for the chance to ask a question.
Let's go with Jane. Jane, do you want to just share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will do. I mean, I won't take up very much time because I'm sure there are other questions as well. But just to say, Jonathan, those are absolutely really good suggestions and very much in line with what we've been proposing. So, were the evaluation to go ahead, the process evaluation would need to capture really good data on what it is that actually happens and everybody's perspectives on why it was done that way and what difference that made and what works well. And we would very much want to build in surveys with young people taking part in detached youth work and have thought that, asking them towards the end of detached youth work at a point when relationships have been built, what did this mean to you? What difference has it made to you? Would be one of the approaches that we'd want to build in. So yeah, those are really helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jane. I didn't like Adam came off. Sorry, Paula. Please go ahead. We've got one more. Oh, we can't hear you, Paula, by the way. You're off mute. You seem to can't place you. No. Do you want to try put it in the chat and then we'll try and answer it that way? Yeah. Super. On that basis, I'd love to just spend 30 seconds wrapping up whilst Paula puts the question in, and then we'll try and answer it. So I was putting this in the chat, but we're already here. So what is YEF doing in this space, and what's our ambition? Very quickly, whilst Paula puts the question in, is here's some headlines, some fantastic news. There is a caveat. There's always a caveat. So here's timeline for our next steps. So as a kickoff, we're going to be seeking to onboard an umbrella organization in the September period and onboard a evaluation partner as well. There'll be an open call around for consortia partners around 2024. So a key thing will be it'll be led by a public body in the main, and will tell more detail, can demonstrate a robust partnership of detached working in the locality. No minimum numbers of areas, and must have a matched funding project of 100K for the area as it stands right now. So that's just to give you some insight. And England and Wales as where all our work is. Then we'll go through a period of area selection, which partners will be successful. It's important to say that we're looking at about 15 consortia, so that's still to be narrowed down to reach the 150 patches that currently we're aiming at. Co-design period will be from December 2024, and that'll be about 6 months. That will start to get into some of the crevices of Jonathan's question there, and building on much of what are still kind of question marks currently. And then delivery will happen at the moment from May 25, year 1, June 25, 26, year 2, and then it will be reporting in 2028. Best way to keep your eyes on that is to sign up to the newsletter. Straight after this webinar, Virtual Learning Cafe, you'll get an email in there. There'll be a link for the newsletter. Sign up, and that's the best way to hear out. But there's loads of councils and loads of delivery organizations. Start having conversations, get readiness, have preparation in terms of that. So I'll stop sharing. That's exciting. That's good news. There is a caveat, and it's indicative, always subject to change, and we've got to find some partners to fund this too. So just as a heads up, those are also in the mix, but we're working very hard in this important piece as a whole. I'll pause there. Let's see if Paula's question has popped up. We will share the slides. I don't think it has. Paula, do you want to try again? You're let's see if we can hear you. No, we're not hearing nothing from Paula.
I think Paula's question did arrive in the chat.
Oh, did it? Sorry. Okay. Do you want, if you can find it, let's
how can we contribute to the evaluation if you go ahead? So you may have covered some of that,
Great.
Caleb, as you
Super.
chatted through, and I guess a call out in October is coming.
Yeah, basically look out for the call out in about October. Is the best way. And look, this is a partnership approach to it. We've got to know that there's enough local areas that want to take a part in this to make it happen. So definitely look out for that. A huge thank you. Okay, a huge thank you to Jane, to Bethia, to Adam. Superbly done. It's everything I would have hoped and dreamed for on behalf of YEF. A huge thank you to many of you in the room who've turned up to listen to this. I hope you're excited, and there's much more to come. We'll do our part, and hopefully you'll do yours. And let's see where this goes. So on behalf of Youth Endowment Fund, myself and my colleagues in the room, have a good afternoon and all the very best.